Hello, friends, and welcome back to Malicious Compliance Stories. Let's start our video with a story about a neighborhood tyrant whose obsession with a parking spot escalated into full-blown harassment. But before we dive in, make sure to hit that subscribe button, smash the like if you enjoy the content, and ring that notification bell so you never miss a juicy story. Harassed over a parking spot. So some of you have been asking for more stories about my crazy neighbor and her adult kids. A reminder, my next-door neighbor, who my friends and I call Crazy Pants, was a very nosy, very entitled woman who tried hard to tell everyone who lived in the same street what they could and couldn't do. Her adult children were equally spoiled. My neighbor on the other side of me, we'll call Gina. Gina's a mother of 3 who works in a local supermarket. She's the sort of person who, if you tripped her up, she'd apologize to your foot. One day, her husband, John, got a new job which came with a company car. Nothing special, it was covered in logos for the company, but it meant Gina could use the family car whenever she needed. Some of the houses where I live have driveways, and some don't. Gina has a drive, but it only takes one car. As they were liable for the company car, that took up space in the drive, and her car would be parked either in front of my house or CP's, as neither of us had drives. It's a public road, so anyone can park anywhere as long as they don't block a drive. One day, entitled daughter bangs on Gina's door. Apparently, she was annoyed that Gina had been parking in front of her mother's house. That space, as she saw it, was for her when she visited, and because Gina was in the space, ED had to park in front of my house and walk the whole 5 feet to her mom's house. Oh, the humanity. This was when Gina made the following mistake. Gee, I'm so sorry, but isn't OP's house right next door? I'm sure you don't have to walk far. ED, how dare you? That's my parking spot. Why do you have 2 cars anyway? You're just a stupid checkout girl. It was at this point John overheard and demanded that ED leave. So ED does what a grown woman of 40 always does. She whines to her mother. Well, Mommy. That was when CP went into overdrive. Over 6 months, whenever Gina and her family stepped out into their garden, CP would come out and shout at the children for being too loud or at Gina for wearing slutty clothes. Gina wears bikinis in the summer, which, being the UK, lasts about 31 minutes. She would also turn up to the supermarket Gina worked at and hovered around her, giving her death stares. Social services, think CPS but they cover more than children, were called and told that Gina and John had been putting out cigarettes on the children. The RSPCA were called and told that Gina has been starving her cat. She didn't even have a pet at the time. Also, every time her car parked in front of CP's house, CP would bang on her door screaming about her parking space. Poor Gina tried everything. She recorded the abuse and called the police and the council, but they were only willing to give a warning. Her work could not remove CP as long as she wasn't doing anything, and she could not prove who called social services and the RSPCA. In an effort to help, as we were between the 2 neighbors, my dad, yep, I live with my dad because I'm his carer, decided to let our hedge grow to block CP's view of Gina's garden so she could have peace. It worked for a while. Then one day we get a knock on the door. Our house is council-owned, so all necessary maintenance work is carried out by them. A man from the council was stood there and let us know that the new fence would be up by 4 p.m. Next thing we heard was the sound of a hedge trimmer. My dad stormed out and demanded to know what was happening. Apparently we had called the council regarding the very slightly wind-damaged fence between our garden and CP's and agreed to have it replaced. We didn't call anyone. In order to put the new fence in, the hedge we had needed to be removed. There was nothing we could do. We made it clear no one had called anyone, but because the fence was damaged, they decided to continue and there was nothing we could do. Lo and behold, the next day CP was leaning over the fence and was back to shouting at the children. I'd love to say that CP got what she deserved, but Gina eventually cracked and sold her car. She then paid £600 for a new fence. After she got rid of the car, the harassment stopped as quickly as it started. Gina's fine now. She has a management position and a new dog who likes to play with mine. I would have used the same trick she uses on her. I'm pretty sure the way she acts, there must be some society guideline she's breaking. And every time she would have tried to call CPS, I would have done the same to her. And our second story. Customer takes us to trading standards for not giving replacement on food he'd already eaten. Quick bit of background for those of you who don't know what a cheese straw is. It's basically a thin strip of pastry with cheese in it that's cooked and eaten as a snack. Anyway, on with the story. A customer comes in and buys 5 cheese straws. We warn him that straws will still be red hot as they've just come out of the oven. In fact, the baker was taking them out of the oven as he was served. He thanks us for the warning, pays, and then leaves the shop. 5 minutes later, he returns to the shop. Didn't think much of it, as often with cheese straws, people will come back and buy more. However, not this time. He places the bag of cheese straws and asks for some alternatives because there was an issue with the taste. Confused, I pick up the bag and ask what the issue is. As I look in the bag, I notice 2 have already been eaten as he replies, "They're too hot and too cheesy." After a brief pause, I apologize and say that as he has left the store and eaten nearly half the product, there's nothing I can do. Especially as we had notified him that they had just come out of the oven, which he had acknowledged. He starts to get annoyed, so I call over the person in charge that day. The customer explains the situation again, and the supervisor explains that there is technically nothing wrong with the food and that he's eaten 2 of them. We cannot replace them. Besides, the other cheese straws we had left were all from the same batch. Customer starts ranting at us. Can't remember the whole thing, he said, as it was a month ago now. But it was something along the lines of, "I'm never coming back into this effing company again. Your head office will hear about this. This is a threat we hear a lot, so none of us took it too seriously. However, we did ring head office just to notify them that the situation had happened." Less than 2 minutes later, I left the shop to do our banking, and who should I see up the road? Yep, the customer eating the rest of the cheese straws. Obviously, there was not an issue with them. He was just trying to get a freebie out of us. As soon as he saw me, he hid the bag. I smiled to myself and went back to work to tell my coworkers what I'd just witnessed, and then thought nothing more of it. The next day, arrived at work to find an area manager there. A complaint had been put in about the cheese straws and how we all apparently were rude to the customer. Once we had all spoken to the area manager and I had explained that the customer had eaten all the cheese straws after the incident, we were told we'd done nothing wrong and no action would be taken against any of us. I'm presuming that the customer was told that no other action was taken because the next thing I heard later that week was that the owner of the company had ended up having to ring the customer and ask them outright what flavor they expected cheese straws to be because there was literally nothing wrong with the cheese straws from that batch. As a precaution, our company will taste test a batch if a complaint's put in. And guess what? Nothing wrong. Customer ended up having a go at the owner and threatening to take us to trading standards. We laughed it off. Big mistake, because guess who got involved? Trading standards, who coincidentally also were perplexed as to the complaint, but they had to follow it through. Needless to say, they ended up doing nothing other than eating some free cheese straws and telling the customer to stop wasting our and their time. Best part is, this complaint all stems from an item that costs £1 at most. It blows my mind how some customers will go the extra mile to try and get what they want. Glad he was told to pound sand. And our last story. Karen, my pool, the court. Hello. This is going to be a long story, so grab some popcorn. A couple of months ago, we had an unplanned break from the madness. My name's Bruce Wayne, and I live in a quiet suburb in a cozy house with a pool in the backyard. Our neighborhood has a homeowners association, HOA, but fortunately my house is not part of it. Although I'm used to peace and quiet, one of our neighbors, Karen, has been disturbing us for several years. I met Karen almost immediately after moving in. She looked like the typical queen of the HOA, always with perfect hair and nails, a haughty expression, and a constant desire to control everything around her. As soon as she found out that our house wasn't subject to the HOA rules, her attitude towards me became, to say the least, unpleasant. Karen often came to the fence and tried to make us follow the HOA rules. One day, after seeing our pool, she even declared, "You're a redneck. You can't even understand that your pool ruins the aesthetics of the neighborhood. You need to get rid of it." To which I, of course, replied, "Karen, if you don't like my pool so much, you can always not look at it." And that was the end of it. Well, almost. My wife and I decided to go on vacation for a week. I warned the neighbors to keep an eye on the house, and of course I specifically asked Karen to stay away. She assured us that nothing bad would happen. But as soon as we left, Karen started taking action. I only found out about it upon our return when I saw my neighbor, Pasha, who said, "Bruce, you won't believe what that crazy Karen did at your house." It turned out that Karen decided her royal status allowed her to throw a party in our backyard. She somehow broke the lock on my back gate, invited guests, and threw a real bash. And the worst part? Her drunk husband decided to jump off the edge of the pool but managed to slip and cut himself on his own watch. He had to get several stitches at the hospital. When we returned, Karen was already standing on our doorstep demanding that we pay her husband's medical bills. Our conversation went like this. Karen, "You were damned obliged to pay for my husband's treatment. It's your fault he got cut. I'll sue your butt, a-hole." Me, "Karen, you illegally entered my private property and threw a party there. Why should I pay? I think I should bill you instead." Karen, "Your pool is unsafe. If it weren't there, my husband wouldn't have gotten cut. He almost lost his damn hand because of you. I'm calling the police on you," she said, grabbing her phone. Me, "Whatever, Karen. If you hadn't trespassed, nothing would have happened." She started dialing and I went inside. The police never showed up, but that wasn't the end of the story. A week later, we received a court summons. Karen decided that her audacity and royal status would help her win the case. The court was much more interesting. The judge, an elderly but clearly wise man, listened carefully to both sides. Karen wasted no time launching into her speech. Karen, "Your Honor, the defendant's pool is extremely dangerous and violates all safety standards. It's their fault that my husband got injured." Judge, "Miss Karen, so you're saying that the defendant's house is part of the HOA? Karen, "Well, not exactly, but that doesn't matter." Judge, "And you entered their property without permission?" Karen, "Well, it was a necessary measure. I wanted to check if everything was okay." Judge, "And did you check?" Karen, "Yes, and I found that everything was not okay." Judge, "Miss Karen, do you understand that you're trespassing on someone else's property is against the law?" Karen, "But that's not important. What's important is that their pool is dangerous." Judge, "Still, let's get back to what you did. You have no right to enter private property without permission. Furthermore, your party wasn't exactly legal either." Karen, blushing, "But..." Judge, "And one more thing, Miss Karen. If you hadn't been on someone else's property, your husband wouldn't have gotten hurt." Karen finally lost her composure and started protesting. "This is unfair. I'll call the police. This man bribed you." The judge calmly replied, "You can certainly call, but I'm sure the police will be more interested in your illegal trespassing than anything else." Of course, the judge dismissed Karen's claim. Moreover, we filed a counterclaim and got a restraining order against Karen, preventing her from approaching our house. When the trial ended, I couldn't help but smile. Karen stormed out of the courtroom in a rage while my wife and I went home to celebrate our small victory. That evening, we opened a bottle of champagne and, sitting by that very pool where it all happened, laughed about how Karen had tried to twist everything. The moral of the story, Karen attacks like a monkey with a handful of crap, so you always have to be on guard. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.